Hello, and welcome to another look with Christian King. Today, I'm going to talk about a few of the fights on UFC Fight Night 133 in Boise, Idaho. That fight card's headlined by Junior Dos Santos versus Ivanov. I'm kind of bad I'm not too sure how to say his name. I know he's the World Series of Fighting heavyweight champion, but to be honest, I don't really know what to expect from this fight. I'm not super big into heavyweight unless you're talking DC, so I'm not even really going to talk about that one, to be honest. So we'll kind of just go over some of the highlights of the card. Sage Northcutt's returning versus Zach Otto. And, I like Sage. I think he's probably a nice person, but I don't see him becoming a champion in the future. I definitely don't see Zach Otto becoming a champion in the future. Not terribly interested in that fight. I mean, I'll watch all these fights because I'm a huge fan, but I really only enjoy talking about the fights that I'm super into. Dennis Bermudez taking on Rick Glenn. That should be a fun, just kind of action-packed, fast-paced fight. Not too sure who'll take that one. Randy Brown's taking on Nico Price. I think Randy Brown is maybe more technical, but Nico's very powerful. We'll have to see what happens there. Now we're kind of getting into some... It's funny, that the further down you work on the card, my favorite fight of this card is Darren Elkins versus Alex Volkanovski, or Alexander, I think is what he goes by, Volkanovski. And I'm really excited about that one. So we'll talk about that. We'll get to that one in a minute. Miles Jury taking on Chad Mendes. Chad Mendes coming back from that 2-year USADA suspension. Apparently had to do with some psoriasis cream that has a growth hormone in it, but he didn't fight it, so maybe that was just his initial cover story, and then he decided to leave it alone. I'm not too sure. I'm not making any accusations, but I'm a little puzzled why, if it was truly a psoriasis cream, why he just accepted a 2-year suspension. I know he was planning on taking about a year off, coming off back-to-back knockout losses. So he was already going to take some time off, but just accepting a 2-year suspension to me is a little interesting of a choice, a career choice, especially considering how it paints you to the fans when you're accepting a 2-year suspension. You're kind of admitting guilt, or at least that's the way it feels from the outside. But either way, I love watching Chad Mendes fight. He's a powerhouse. I think he's 5'6" at 145. Miles Jury, I think, is closer to maybe 5'10" or 5'11". I think Chad Mendes should win this fight pretty easily. Miles Jury prefers a slow-paced kind of outside fight, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, I'm not a huge Miles Jury fan, so I can't say I've watched any of his fights more than once, as opposed to Chad Mendes, where there's a few fights there's one fight in particular, the Aldo 2 fight, that I've watched 100 times. So I think the thing about Chad Mendes, I think he can push the pace, and I think he's just a little better everywhere than Miles Jury. I think he's a little better on the ground. He's definitely more powerful, and I think just his high pace will be able to kind of fluster Jury, and I think he can pretty easily get a unanimous decision or maybe a late stoppage, but that's also depending on him still looking like the same Chad Mendes coming back from 2-year suspension. So, I mean, you don't really know. I would favor Chad Mendes, but he could come out looking terrible. You don't know. Marion Reneau is taking on Kat Zingano. Marion Reneau, I think, is like 40. She's a school teacher, if I'm not mistaken, but she's slowly working her way up. I believe she's coming off a win over Sarah McMahon by submission. Kat Zingano is coming off a loss to Caitlin Vieira, I believe. And Kat Zingano, I love her story, and she's an interesting person to me. I guess I'm cheering for her, but I can't decide if I think it's good that she's going back into a fight so quickly. It wasn't that long ago that she lost. She definitely, she's had a lot of long layoffs in between fights, so maybe it is good for her to get right back in there. I don't think she took a lot of damage in her last fight. Kat Zingano is definitely the more powerful, strong woman out of these two. Kat Zingano's gotten up there in age a little bit. I mean, she's no longer... she's not young. I think she's 30. Yeah, she's 36. Marion Reneau is officially 41. Wow. She might be the oldest female fighter on the roster, if I'm not mistaken. I'd have to double check that. But that should be a good fight. I think Kat Zingano, if she's there, if she shows up mentally and she looks good, I think that she can win this fight just by being the more powerful athlete. But don't count Marion Reneau out. If she wins, I think she might end up catching a submission, or Kat just looks really flat and she gets a decision. But I'm going to go with Kat by unanimous decision on this one. Getting down to the preliminary card, which So not only is Darren Elkins and Alexander Volkanovski on the prelims, but it's not even headlining the prelims. I don't even know what to say about that. I mean, to me, that's the main event. I want that to be the 5-round fight. I mean, for me at least, as a hardcore fan, that's my favorite fight on this card, and it's the third fight up on the prelims. So interesting decision. Alejandro Perez is taking on Eddie Wineland. I'm not too sure what to read on that fight. I don't really know where Eddie Wineland is at this point in his career. Not too sure about that one. And then I'm gonna save the Elkins Volkanovski fight for last, because that's the main one I'm gonna talk about. So that's the next one down, but we'll pass over that for now. Come back to it. Said Nurmagomedov. I think I remember hearing that there's another Nurmi who's not related to Habib Nurmi. So I guess this is not a relative of Habib, but I'm guessing he's still Dagestanian based on his name. He's taking on Justin Scoggins, who actually started his career on the local circuit around the area I live. So I've actually seen him fight, unless I'm thinking of his brother. I may have seen his brother fight. Maybe I haven't seen him fight in person, but I know the Scoggins brothers come from this same area, so I always like to see people from around here. I mean, I don't know him personally, but I like to see people from my part of the country do okay, but I also love the Dagestani guys, so I don't know what to make of this fight. I'm guessing the Dagestani guy probably has some amazing grappling, but you really never know. So I mean, they're all over the place with their skill sets, and they're all good. They're all really tough, that's for sure. So I don't know enough about Nurmagomedov, or this Nurmagomedov at least, to make a pick here really, but I'll be looking forward to watching that one. We have, forgive me, I actually have not heard of one of these fellas here. I'm going to butcher the name, so I'm just going to pass over it. And then down on the Fight Pass card, we got Liz Carmouche taking on Jennifer Maia, Mark De La Rosa taking on Elias Garcia, and Jessica Aguilar taking on Jody Esquibel, I think is how you say it. And that is a fight, that last one, Jessica versus Jody, that fight was pulled from a recent card because Jessica had a chapped lips. I'm saying that with quotations. They were trying to be nice, and then when she made us think about it, they kind of had to put her on blast and be like, listen, we think you might have, herpes, and that's why you can't fight, because that's contagious. So they kind of tried to just be politically correct and just kind of say chapped lips and let people maybe think she was dehydrated, but she kind of made us think about that and talked about how ridiculous it was. So they kind of had to come out and say, hey, listen, there was a possibly contagious lip infection or whatever words they used, but basically, yeah. So, I'm sure that she is eager to get back in. They're probably really frustrated. I know if that is what she has, I'm not going to judge her for it, because that's, you can get that in all types of ways. If she does have that, I know that stress on the body and the brain can make it flare up. So my guess is cutting weight is very likely to cause a flare up. So either way, I hope she makes it to the fight this time. But just to be honest, at this point, she's a little bit older, and I think has kind of missed her prime. She was in World Series of Fighting when I would say she was in her prime, and she hasn't done too well in the UFC. So sorry, ladies, not terribly interested in that fight. But let's get to the people's main event, or my main event of this fight card. We've got Darren the Damage Elkins taking on Alexander the Great Volkanovski. So what do we know about these guys? Okay, well, Alexander has a 17-1 record. I think his one loss was at a much higher weight class, and I believe it was a decision. Darren Elkins has 5 losses on his record. Not too sure where all of them came from. I've been following his career. I feel like he may have lost to Mendes back in the day, unless I'm thinking of a different guy. Let's see. His last loss was to Hakran Diaz by decision. I believe that's one of Jose Aldo's teammates, and that was in Brazil in 2014. He lost a unanimous decision to Jeremy Stevens. That's the loss I remember. Yeah, he got beat up pretty bad by Jeremy Stevens. And then he lost. Yes, he did get TKO'd by Chad Mendes. Yeah, that was the Henderson versus Melendez card. Okay, yeah, that's all coming back to me now. So anyways, he's been on quite a streak right now. He has won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in a row. He's coming off, he had that comeback of the year against Mirsad Bektik, and then he had a kind of comeback. I mean, I wouldn't say he was getting whooped, but he was getting lit up on the feet a little bit by Michael Johnson back in January, and came back and got the rear naked choke. I think it was in the second round, or at the very end of the first. So Darren Elkins has been looking good for some time now. He's training full-time at Team Alpha Male. He finally got his 10-year pipe fitter. I don't know what the word for it is. I'm not too familiar, but it has to do with a union. Like basically, you don't have to be once you get to that 10-year point, or maybe I think it's 10,000 hours. It's something crazy like that. But once you get to that point, your job's protected. You don't have to keep working to keep your place. Like you can just stop and put it on hold. Like just freeze your pipe fitter certification or whatever it's called. So now he's training full time. He looks like he's been improving a lot. The thing is, at the end of the day, Darren Elkins is always going to be a slow, janky striker, but he's also always going to be the toughest guy in that cage. And I'll be damned if you can find me a featherweight as tough as this guy. Darren Elkins, I don't know what he's made of, but he lives up to his name, The Damage. And this guy will take a beating and come right back for more. He has no fear in his heart. This dude is made of iron, straight up. But he's taken on a guy who has a game similar to him, who I think also has an athletic and skill advantage. So this might be where Darren Elkins' win streak comes to an end. Let's look at these guys' age really quick. Darren Elkins is 34, which is no spring chicken for a featherweight. Alexander the Great is 29, so he's probably in his prime right now, or maybe just kind of getting settled into his prime in the UFC. He's looked great since he came to the UFC. He's won 4 fights in a row, most notably over, I would say at least over Jeremy Kennedy, although Shane Young has looked good as of late, unless I'm confusing him with someone else, and he did get a unanimous decision there, but he beat the brakes off of Jeremy Kennedy, who came in there thinking that he would have the grappling advantage, and he just smushed that kid. So, he's looking very good as of late. He's been off on the shelf since the beginning of February, which isn't too bad at all. So he's actually had less of a layoff than Darren Elkins, but I feel like they both had a good amount of rest for how grinding their styles are. I think they're going to be coming in here, unless there's an injury that we don't know about. I think they're both going to come in here in peak shape, and I'm hoping that we get all 3 rounds out of this one, and then I'm just going to be even more mad it's not the main event, because I really want 5 out of this one. If someone gets a stoppage, I think it's going to be Alexander, but I'm a big fan of both these guys, and I want to see both their careers go forward. And it's a little bit of I may be misusing this word, but it seems like a little bit of a conundrum for me personally when I think about what I want to happen here. Because the thing is, I want Darren Elkins to finally get his. If he wins this fight, he's very close to a title shot, or at least he's definitely in line for a number 1 contender fight. And if he loses it, with him not being a flashy striker, with him not being someone who talks trash, he's kind of going to go all the way to the back of the line. So it's going to be bad for him if he loses this fight. On the other hand, I really want to see what Alexander Volkanovski can do at the top of this division. And if he can't get past Darren Elkins, then he might not be cut out for the top of this division. But I'm going to throw in a little caveat with that. If he can't get by Darren Elkins, it may just be because Darren Elkins is the more experienced and possibly tougher version of himself. I do think Alexander Volkanovski has much better striking, but Darren Elkins is tough. He can hang in there and take a little bit of a beating until he starts getting his fight, until he starts slowing down a little bit. I haven't really seen Alexander Volkanovski slow down, but if anyone's going to make you slow down, it's going to be Darren Elkins. So, I would love to make a pick for this fight. And I think I will make a pick for this fight just to stay consistent with what I do. But this is a tough one for me to pick. It's a 3-round fight. If it was a 5-round fight, I think that Darren Elkins could end up taking a decision. But if we get to the end of 3 rounds, I'm afraid for him that Alexander Volkanovski may already be up 2 rounds by the time they hit that 3rd round, if it plays out as I think. I also think if someone is going to get a stoppage, it's more likely to be Alexander Volkanovski, because he has much harder, more intense and persistent ground and pound, and he's a better striker on the feet. I think Darren Elkins is too tough to get finished, but I really think he would need 5 rounds to win this type of style. I could be wrong, and to be honest, I'll probably be cheering for Darren Elkins, but I'm going to have to take Alexander the Great Volkanovski by unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board, which in layman's terms means 2-1 out of the 3 rounds. That's my pick. I'm going to go with that. I can't wait for these fights. I will not be watching them live. I will be at a concert on Saturday night, but I will watch them Sunday morning or late Sunday night at the hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I'll be looking forward to that. And I hope y'all tune in for these fights. They're on Fox Sports 1. Preliminary cards on Fox Sports 1. Make sure you don't miss that Darren Elkins fight. I would tune in around 7 p.m. to make sure you don't miss that one. And of course, the first 3 fights are on Fight Pass starting at 6:30 as usual. All right, guys, I may be back for some more content unrelated to any specific fights later on this week. But until then, if you don't hear from me, make sure you tune in at 7 p.m. to watch Darren the Damage Elkins take on Alexander the Great Volkanovski.